Kia orana. My name is Mingwei. My family name comes first, Ko Mingwei, but just call me Mingwei. And I'm an educator with a very, very small, very, very grassroots organization called Center for Getting Things Started. So as you can imagine, even the grassroots need some help getting started. That's what we do. Before we actually start, everybody wiggle your toes. And if you've crossed your legs this way, uncross them and cross them the other way. And last thing, to wake us up a little bit more, start with your lobes and massage your ears going up. And then back down. All right, you should all be awake. So this is the moment we've been waiting for. We've heard from the clouds that provide us rain. We've had the metaphor of making a basket to collect this rain and this information. And now we will hear from 5 amazing farmers and farmer organizations of how they are using this rain they've collected in their baskets. So we will start by first introducing yourself, and we'll pass the microphone down. So introduce yourself, the organizations and the islands you represent, because some of these places are a group of many islands, and then we'll go into some questions. But please go ahead.
Hey, kia ora tātou katoto. My name is Teina Rongo. I am from the Cook Island. I am the chairman of an organization, NGO, Korero te Orau, here established on Rarotonga.
I am Maria Linibi. I'm president of a women's organization in Papua New Guinea, made of about 10,000 women. And I'll explain later. Thank you.
Aloha. Aloha, my name is Kuʻuleinani Maunupau. I am the president of the Mahiʻai o Keanae, which is the farmers of Keanae on the island of Maui. It took a lot to come here with the disasters in Maui, and so please excuse me if I have moments of choking up talking about my island, but thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. My name is Pita, Tikai. I'm the coordinator of a local NGO in Solomon Island, that is Kastom Gaden. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Hazelman. I'm the technical advisor for the Pacific Food Resilient Program of this organization known as Live and Learn Environmental Education. And Live and Learn is in Solomons, Fiji, Vanuatu, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Papua New Guinea, Tonga, Micronesia, and in Asia, we're in Cambodia, Maldives, and Vietnam. So thank you for having us here. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very, very much. So we'll have women first, and we'll start with someone we all very fondly know as Mama Maria. She's not only mama to us, but she is mama to several tens of thousands of women farmers in Papua New Guinea. So Mama Maria, I understand that your organization includes many, 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 many smallholder farmers and growers, mainly women, all across Papua New Guinea. So for your growers in Papua New Guinea, what are the largest impacts of climate change? And what is your organization doing to help your members mitigate, adapt on these impacts? Please do share some of your stories.
Thank you. Maybe explain a little bit about Papua New Guinea. We are made up of more than close to 10 million people now, and 800 different languages, and thousands of cultures and traditions. For me, as a woman farmer, when I retired from my government-paid job, I went back to the village. And I started to see how I could get along in the village. Where else in town I was on a paid job. I didn't have to work the land. Well, that forced me to work the land. And when I worked the land, I could see, working in a government department was different. Working on the land, there's so many issues to it, especially women in our country. 85% of them, they do most of the work. Especially to do with climate change, women are the vulnerables during climate change. We carry 20 liters of water. You can walk for 6 to 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers, just to bring water to the family when there's a drought. Men don't do that. They don't care. We have to feed the babies. Thank you. With that, I started up an organization because I was a government liaison officer and majored in communications. So I decided to go back to the village, work with the women. That's grassroots now. We're talking grassroots here. And I want to bring our conversation into how we can partner, how we can get donor funding, how we can get our women to work together. Someone here mentioned tell a woman. Sorry, it's our friend from Fiji, tell a woman. I like that word. That's my friend, Sant Kumar. When you tell a woman, the message goes down to everyone. I won a Westpac Award in Cairns in Australia when I mentioned someone that Kofi Annan said, if you educate a woman, you're educating an entire community. And if you're educating a man, you're educating an individual. And that earned my Westpac Award. And with that, I would like to say that I could get that topic down and talk to the women and mobilize the women. And that's how we got to get more than 10,000 women. And women are still working. Today, I have a bigger number than I expect to. And I'd like to go back to the challenges that the first panelist talked about, especially our donors and our funders here. I'd like to thank PFON. But before I thank PFON, I'd like to thank IFAD. Thank you, IFAD. Thank you, PFON, for organizing what women in agriculture in Papua New Guinea could do. As I sit and speak here, as two of my women organizations in the commodity boards were in Melbourne last week, and they have won international awards on promoting coffee in Papua New Guinea. So it's not only me. I'm an overarching body, but I have my own farm, and I'm not just talking, but I have my own farm to run as well. And when you talk about partnerships, in PNG, there's so many people there, 10 million people. I asked them, Danny, how many people do you have in the cooks? Danny, what did you tell me? 8,000 or 10,000. I laughed and I said, man, I should bring you to PNG and you wouldn't want to come with me. Anyway, I could influence donors. I could influence private sector because there is that word, women. I'm challenging women here and your Pacific Island women too as well. When you go to a man and you talk to him, a man to a man, I don't care who you are. When a woman goes and talks to a man, what do you say? Question. I learned that by going to a man and then talking to him, explaining what I want. He said, oh yeah, how can I help you? That was the answer. That's the secret about it. That's the secret about it. He had a heart. You know, when God made men and women, he put someone there and said, this is from the side of this rib. So when I came out of my job, I said, okay, donors, what can we do together as partners? You know, not as partners because I'm an individual, but as an organization or as someone like PFON. I believe in what Danny was saying, putting everything in a basket. Yeah, put everything in a basket. Donors, I've been working for about 20 years. I'm a founder of PNG Women in Agriculture. I've been based with PNG National Agriculture Research Institute. I'm on the board. I'm on several boards in PNG and even in PFON too. On that board, you have the influence over the policymakers as well. On our board, they tend to listen to women's voices too, because gender is high on the list, on the donors list. And there's a lot of other activities that you have to be wise enough to walk in the donor door and knock and say, how can I partner with you? In PNG, I have so many organizations that I partner with, private sector. I don't just go to donors and, I go to the private sector next door. I tell them, we have a current livestock on looking after chickens. And there's a company in Papua New Guinea that they breed and they sell chicken that private sector. I go to the door and I said, listen, how can you and I partner together? You have all those eggs to sell. You have all those day-old birds to sell. Can I be your network? Can I be your partner? I'll distribute it for you. And it's a two-way thing. So that's how we should think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mama Maria. Let's hear from our host country, the Cook Islands, Dr. Teina. Okay, so with regards to the communities you're working with and with the farmers here on the Cook Islands, what are some of the biggest impact of climate change, and what is your organization doing to mitigate against these impacts and and adapt to these impacts? Do you have any success stories? So I noticed that Mama Maria's success stories had to do a lot with relationships. So in the Cook Islands, what are some of your success stories for mitigation and adaptation with your farmers?
Thank you for that question. First of all, just to give some context on the impact of climate change here in the Cook Islands. I've traveled the islands throughout the northern Cook Island and also the southern Cook Island, and I've seen the climate impact on these islands, ranging from the rising sea levels, where agricultural lands have been inundated by salt water, shifts in rainfall distribution, and in the marine environment, as mentioned earlier, coral bleaching, so we're losing all our corals. There's a decline in reef fish, and then of course the pelagic species, which are the tuna. So from my conversation with the elders and the fishermen and the planters, things have changed, not in a positive way, more in a negative way. So, part of this is you have these climatic shifts that are cyclic, and then you also have the impacts of the anthropogenic-driven climate change, which is the climate change that we've been hearing all the time. So, with regards to anthropogenic climate change, that requires cooperation with big countries to reduce their emissions. But we as individual islands in the Pacific have a role to play as well, particularly at the local level. So we're seeing all of this. Part of the work that we do as an organization, so Korero to Orau translates to the knowledge of the land, sky, and sea. And our focus is really on indigenous issues, indigenous people, empowering indigenous people, reviving our traditional practices, culture, because we truly believe that that is really a solution to adaptation to climate change. Even though some argue that there are limits, I don't believe there are limits, because if our ancestors were able to adapt to climate change is not new. In the past, surely we can do the same today. One of the challenges that we are facing today is a disconnect. We are disconnected from our environment, from our resources. If you are disconnected from your environment, you don't know what's going on, and you don't value it as well. So part of the work that we do as an organization is to work with the young people. We don't work with, as my colleague over here is saying, in the millions. A few hundreds is what we work with here. is to bring education and awareness on climate change issues into the schools, into youth groups, church groups, sports groups as well. For, say, 5 years ago, no, I'll take it back. 7 years ago, I realized that the church play a really important role in bringing communities together. Because one thing that's happening today with our community is they are, what's the word? They're no longer together and they're no longer acting like a community. We're moving towards a more individual society. We're no longer this communal society. But what I realized with the church, they are able to do this. They are able to bring communities together. So for the longest time, I've been trying to get into our theological college here, just next door, because this is where our oromituas come from. Yep, our church leaders come from. You go to the other islands, they are one of the most powerful individuals in the community. They're more powerful than the government officials themselves. When the church leader says, do this, everyone follows. So I realized that the role that they play, so I wanted to get into where they are coming out of, which is the theological college, Takamoa, to influence through them. So I teach a course at the college called Eco-Theology. Basically, this course is about recognizing the role that the church play in the environment, God's relationship with the environment. So 4 years ago, I got into the school, and I've been teaching them since. So that's one part. This is one part of working with the community and ensuring adaptation measures. But the most important thing for us is working with our youth. And this disconnect that I was just talking about, if you are disconnected, you have no relationship with your environment. And if someone comes to you and say, I want to put something in your lagoon, I want to build a hotel in there, you will say yes, because you're not using it. So part of the program that we run is to teach our kids to fish the traditional way. Because if you teach them, they're out there monitoring and they start to value that environment and the resources, they will then protect it. On the land, we are teaching them this concept of mountain to the ocean, where things flow from the mountain. So we have activities in the mountain, come down to the wetland and into the lagoon. And we also do voyaging, traditional voyaging. This is what we take our kids through, our youth through. On the land, we have this, I think I will take some of you to this site, which is in this watershed area. We go there and we plant this banana called king banana. But again, I'll elaborate more on that later. We come into the wetland, we teach them how to plant taro, because taro is planted in an important ecosystem which filters everything that goes from the land into the lagoon. So by the time it gets into the lagoon, it's clean. So we teach them to plant and to understand the role that this ecosystem plays. Because what's been happening here in Rarotonga, a lot of these wetland areas are being filled for development because we are disconnected, again, disconnected. So that's the other part of what we do. And then beyond that is the lagoon. We have a program that teaches kids how to scuba dive so they can see, because often this environment is seen only by tourists. And so the people that actually make the decision are not aware of what's going on in their own backyard. And so education is key, and targeting the young people is critical for us as an organization. Success story. Science, ever since we shifted away from agriculture, I think that's going beyond 1980s. After that, we shifted towards tourism. When that happened, there was no more gardening in the school. That was actually taken out. There was less focus on science. And now we are facing the impacts of climate change. Agriculture is becoming a problem. Deep sea mining is on the table. We have no scientists. So our organization decided that we need to put science back into the classroom through agriculture, because agriculture is science. The first school that we started was this school over here. So this school have a gardening because of the project that we introduced. And this funding came from outside, but with collaboration with government, particularly the Ministry of Agriculture. So so now, after we piloted this project here in Awarua School, we are now in all the schools on Rarotonga. So all the schools have a garden. We continued our work going into the schools to provide technical assistance to help them understand what climate change is, the role that these ecosystems play, and the threats that our environments are facing today, and the role that culture and traditional practices play in this space. So that's one of the success story. Sports, we're also in sports. We're everywhere. Our organization have started a sports competition called Rising Stars. And this is where we push our messaging on healthy living, reduce plastic use, all of these other environmental problems that we are seeing through this. We have a media team that pushes our message through social media. It's happening right now. And we go to the Painua, and the other thing we do is we are eradicating a starfish that is killing our reef. And we've been doing this for 4 years. But on top of this is all driven by people that are really passionate about the environment and the role that our traditional practices and culture play. Without that passion, I don't really care about money. I'm not sure my chances of getting funding from potential donors here. But my philosophy has always been do the work money chase. Because if we wait for money, nothing will happen. And so that's been our philosophy, and it's been working for us. We're always out there working, no rest. We are working with our youth, not only those that have a pathway to university or a good career pathway already established, but we also work with those that are at risk. So because in order to make this work, you got to take everyone with you. No one gets left behind. So that's what we do. And we work pretty much 24 hours, 7 days a week. We get calls from our kids, hey, I need help. I'm at the police station. We're there to help them. It's about changing the mindset of our young ones. Because if we don't deal with the at-risk ones, they become nuisance to society, and then we have to deal with them. So we bring them all on board, and we are working with them. And like I said, I will take you guys to the place where we do the work that we do, and I'll talk more on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's continue that theme of communities with Stephen. So Stephen, how does Live and Learn engage with communities to identify issues and priorities in general and in any specifically related to climate change adaptation?
Yeah, thank you. Live and Learn work in 6 key thematic areas: climate change adaptation, environment protection, disaster risk reduction and response, water sanitation and hygiene, and gender and women's empowerment. We'd like to acknowledge our donors here, the Government of Australia, New Zealand, IFAD. To answer the question specifically, the key has been relationships. In these countries, we have officers with managers and staff. For example, in Fiji, there's 100 staff. In Solomon Islands, it varies across. Our country leaders are in regular contact with government ministries and local community leaders, for example, the Kaupule in Tuvalu, to understand issues and priorities. They are also members of civil society organizations like PFON and BoardCom. Our boards are also active in the community and represent diverse groups and brings ideas to our country offices and projects. For example, in Kiribati, we include medical, business, community sector organization, and so on. So it's having staff in countries, officers with networks and ideas that can be used to support project designs. For new projects, we might be alerted by a donor, and we'll work with country managers to formulate a concept and then to develop these into proposals. More recently, we've started to work with country officers to help identify priority project areas from their discussions with communities. We are ready for proposal calls. For example, it's long-standing series of work in Cambodia, where the New Zealand government has just signed a project for 25 million to work with them on water, for example, where we had climate change resilient assessment, adaptation, and livelihood projects working in various parts of the provinces, partnering with community organizations like protected areas and community fisheries committees, with governments at various levels and with farmers' organizations, so we are able to develop larger projects. And links aligned our activities to broader visions for adaptation. Specifically, we have a climate resilient island program where and then this is where MFED comes in with I think the amount of 20 million to work in these with these grassroots. To cut this short, and I will be sending, since I'm new to this organization, I've just left SPC after 21 years in July. Basically, to answer this is that we have very detailed profiles for each communities, and then work with them to see how we can implement this. Yeah, so basically, how do we work in there? We have officers in these countries that were mentioned, and very detailed working with universities to really identify all the climate change activities. One of the main things that has been mentioned is that we need to educate these communities on what resilient and what climate change means before we can attempt to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you again. Yes, the theme of relationships keeps coming about. Yeah, this is how we are as islanders. Relationships are everything. Ku'ule, I know it took a lot for you to be here. And I know when we wrote these questions, it was before August 8th. So I acknowledge that many things have changed. So in the light of what has happened and also in the past, how have you been working with your farmers and your community members around climate change, and where does your organization fit in terms of helping them adapt to these impacts? Any stories, advice?
Okay, thank you. So for me, my position is a grant writer. So I'm the one that helps the farmers apply for funding, apply for resources. And I can tell you that it does not reach the small farmer. Over and over again, they are rejected, and it goes to larger farmers, usually non-Indigenous. So for the Indigenous of Hawaii, the Native Hawaiian population, they are being pushed out of farming. I want to give a little historical context. About 7 to 8 years ago, a large-scale farming operation by Alexander and Baldwin for sugarcane decided that it was no longer profitable, and they were just going to cease all farming. Without any strategic planning, they basically stopped. And what that did is you have 41,000 acres of sugarcane that overnight turns into dry grass. And Maui went from a beautiful green island to over 50% of it being brown and a potential for fire. So of course, since that happened, we have experienced a lot of fire, and resulting in what happened in Lahaina. So when it comes to large-scale monocropping farming, nobody will, in the media or anything, mention anything about the billions of dollars being made while the local farmers are struggling, literally struggling. And so what was interesting is when the government came in, so for disaster relief, I tell you, if it was not for the Native Hawaiian community, there would have been no disaster relief for the first 3 days. There was no show of government. And when they finally came in, this is no joke, you can read this in Hawaii, they blamed the taro farmer. The taro farmer who receives less than 5% of the water on Maui, and yet the companies had just a few weeks before, the corporation said, we need more water. They said, wait, ask the taro farmers first. And suddenly the fire comes up and it was the taro farmer. That's why we didn't have the water to fight the fires. Absolutely ridiculous. But this is what the US government is doing to us in Hawaii. Hawaiians own less than 10% of the properties, and that's why I really admire Rarotonga, who does not sell your land to foreigners. We are completely controlled by foreign money. We receive 12 million visitors a year. So here the taro farmer is receiving such little water while the tourists take showers all day. We have golf courses for them. We have pools for them to swim in. And still the farmer is blamed for the lack of water. And so it's overwhelming. It's frustrating. And so it's so good to see so many Pacific Island farmers, because back in Hawaii, it is a fight to keep your farm open. It is a fight, and they do everything to cut off your water, to limit your resources. And in Lahaina, 2 days after, you had real estate agents and corporations from the US coming down. There's literally farmers weeping on the ground, and they're like, hey, I'll give you $1 million for your land right now. Just trying to buy up, because all they're thinking about is the future development of Lahaina and not the people of Lahaina. So it's been capitalism, and the greed of capitalism has definitely expedited climate change in the islands. And so it's hard to fight climate change when you have a system that expedites it. So as Native Hawaiian farmers in Keanae, they've been managing the waters for thousands of years. And a few years ago, the state officially gave us a 10-year agreement to manage our own water resources. So it's not even acknowledged the thousands of years that they have already been managing it until the US can come in and say, okay, we acknowledge you now. So it is extremely frustrating, and as we face, indigenous people, as Native Hawaiians, we are not considered indigenous to Hawaii. They have not even labeled us. We are simply wards of the state. And what wards of the state mean is that they manage all of our lands and all of our waters. And they have sold it off to the highest bidder for over 100 years. So there's so many impacts, and what I see is the resiliency of the farmer. Keanae is an ancient farming village that has planted kalo, taro for over thousands of years. And even when the Lahaina situation happened, they got as much food and resources as they can. They raised monies globally and started helping the Lahaina farmers and the Lahaina families. And so climate change, as devastating as it is, we are trying to adapt, trying to address it, and really trying to depend on our own communities, because we cannot depend on the governments. I know the governments have very good people working for them, and we respect them. They do not represent the complete bureaucracy that oppresses indigenous people, not just in Hawaii, but around the world. And so to see so many indigenous faces here is wonderful. It brings me hope. And I do hope that eventually we do get funding for small farmers in Hawaii to continue growing food. Because in Hawaii, we do ship in 90% of the food that we eat. So when COVID happened and the shipping stopped for a little bit, it did cause frantic. People were hoarding, but in the Native Hawaiian community, they really pulled together. You know, they try to feed each other, share resources. So it is a complex issue, and I'm bringing up Lahaina and the fires because it is so recent and dear to my heart. But those are the issues we are facing in Hawaii. Thank you so much.
Thank you, mahalo nui ku'ule. Thank you for bringing up the theme of resilience. And Pita, you get to pick up on that theme of resilience because I know Solomon Islanders are very resilient. And so with KGA, with Kastom Garden Association, again, same question, climate change adaptation, the work with farmers, what are some of the activities that have worked to provide this resilience as we move forward?
Thank you. I'll start with, you need to know, in Kastom Garden, we work with farmers that are scattered around the island and quite challenging. And most, I should say, some are in the remote area where you have to travel a long distance. And also, our farmers are faced with climate change because Kastom Garden is trying to promote food security. It promotes food security, so you can't do away with climate change because food security is challenged by climate change. And so, with all our activities, we try also to address food security in all of what we are doing. And so that is what Kastom Garden is basically doing. So in our activities, what we did, maybe the key achievement I should say is we try to encourage farmers to do collections of our own local indigenous crop in all the islands. We work with more than 6,000 members in our network, our own network, local network, and we try to, with donors funding, we try to establish germplasm centers in all the islands because we have different contexts, some are in the islands or volcanic islands, and some of our islands are atoll islands, so they are faced with different challenges when it comes to climate change. So we are trying to do collections in the islands. So each islands where we work, they try to do collections of what they have, and then they bulk them in their community gardens that we supported through donors funding. And in these gardens, they have these local collections, and then they can do their own assessment or evaluations, and after that evaluations, then the farmers in that community will then share to our farmers through our network. So that is how we share germplasms material around our countries or throughout the provinces, the 9 provinces of Solomon Island. So when disasters strike in one part of the country, then it's easy for Kastom Garden to source material from the other islands that can be given to that community that have been affected by climate change. Yeah, so that is how our network works. And with that, when it comes to climate change, all our methods that we are using, we are training farmers to use or to grow crops that are resilient. So we also introduce crops that are from the CPAC, from SPC, and also the ones that are collected locally, that are collected and evaluated. It's seen as superior type of crop in that community. And these crops have been shared, been given to other parts of the country. to be grown. And when they are assessed, they're looking at things like their characteristic related to climate change, like maybe pest and disease tolerance, or could be salt tolerance, waterlog tolerance, and so forth. So if you look closely, what Kastom Garden is doing is it's also conserving our own local species or our own local indigenous crop that are resilient to our climate or our local environment. That is how we maintain our local species. So when times of disaster strike, we are able to survive. We can be adapted to that climatic impact. So that is what we are doing, basically. And also maybe one thing I'll also mention is even with our approach, we are working with small-scale farmers. So there's less tillage or cultivation of soil, so it also conserves our soil, and our method that we encourage farmers to do is to grow even things like cover crops or intercropping, all these sorts of things that are more agroecological, farming system. So not only in terms of availability of food or accessibility of food to the family, but also these methods that they are using, farming methods, are also adapted or can be resilient to the climate change that we are experiencing now. And it relates to food security. Because you see, we experience like back at home in our countries, people resort to go to processed food because it also related to climate change that affected their crop or affected their land, so they can't grow food that they can easily afford to feed their family. So they start to buy food from the shops. And so we start to see non-incurable disease that are increasing now in our country. And so we try to address this, that if farmers can grow their own crop that are resilient or pest resistance or tolerance to certain type of climate, then they can still survive under the pressure or climate shock. I think that is what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists, for that first round of answers, which, if I may categorize, we had 3 R's. That was the message from all 5 of them of relationships, how crucial grassroots organizations are in adapting to climate change, the role of relationships, whether it's the relationships amongst each other, amongst their farmers, amongst the children, amongst the women. That was a really strong message, relationships with local government and so on. And then the most recent theme, which is also exciting, but it also came up in all the ways, was the theme of farmer-led or children-led research. So the idea that we look back to our traditional knowledge, that's research. In Hawaii, we say we kilo, we have a deep observation. And we use this research for resilience, biodiversity, and again, as we move forward. And of course, that theme of resilience, resilience of peoples, resilience of cultures, as well as resilience of our soil and our food. So second round, and we have to do this in 10 minutes, guys, because it's lunchtime. So we'll start with Stephen, and we go to Pita, and then Kuʻulei, and then Mama Maria, and we'll end with Dr. Teina. A quick advice and message in the second round about partnerships and relationships, back to that. Any advice about how do we develop effective partnerships and effective relationships amongst our farmers, amongst local government, amongst funders, the players in our room? What are some of the strategies and advice for developing effective relationships? Each of you gets 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. We're still looking for the answer ourselves. Yeah, being part of developing an NGO from nothing, in this case, PoetCom with Karen and Andy from Women in Business, I suppose the identifying your strengths, the capacity, the right people in these organizations, very capable people that can communicate, can mobilize resources, can implement projects on a timely manner, report to donors and all that. As Karen mentioned, we're very proud that Kyle and his lot, during the Hofs and Mofs meeting in Nandi, they were given one seat, but they had 4 of them there. They should have been only 1 seat. So it means the farmers' voices were heard in that level. So we got to advocate at the national level, make sure that we are in any discussion on agriculture and climate change in the countries, we need to be in the phases of development. So, because if you're not doing that, you'll miss out in countries' priority setting exercises, and then you're left out. In the organic movement, we lobby our members, and we found that by doing that, organic was in the national development plans in 19 of the 22 Pacific countries. So we need to make sure that our farmers organizations are in that development space. Also, align your organizations to trends. Look at it 5-10 years down the road and align yourself so you'll be irrelevant as you go. But leadership in this organization is vital. You'll always have 1 or 2 that started it. Now the question is, what happens if that founder leaves? What will happen to the organization? Myself and Karen are moving away from the organic movement, and new people are in, so we'll see how it grows, and I'm sure for PFON too. What happens in that space? And KGA is a good example. When Tony went surfing somewhere, he left the organization, and that's the nature of our work. It goes up and down, and we need to maybe it grows naturally into, and then we learn, or we anticipate the changes and prepare for leadership, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll say here that grassroots organizations and are working. They work directly with farmers, with rural people, and so we know their needs, their context very well, better. We know them better, I should say. Okay, so example, like Kastom Gaden is working with more than 6,000 members. It's almost half of Cook Island population, because you say 10,000, eh?
Yeah.
So we work with these members, and these members are coming from different parts of the country. And so we know exactly their context, their challenges when it comes to climate change or when it comes to food security and so forth. So when we talk about partnership with government and donors, it's important that the governments and donors have to work through the grassroots organizations in terms of providing services, because the farm organization can give a clear directive of the challenges that we would like to address. So for us to achieve donors' objectives, or when it comes to climate change and adaptation, national adaptation objectives, then we have to work with the grassroots organizations, because we have a network that is already existed, that we can channel our communications, or we can go together hand in hand to implement what the government and donors have in mind for us to achieve. Thank you.
So as a grant writer, I do get approached a lot by farming organizations on Maui. And so what I do tell them, because I can't spread my resources, is I say partner with Nā Mahiʻai o Keanae. So that is important, is to continuing partnering, even if they're 20 miles away. The more farmers you have in your organization or more farming and farmers that you have in your organization, the better the proposal is. And what we're trying to do is also build capacity. So I am outside the community of Keanae. So I'm going inside, and as we start to develop it and build it, I want to make sure that the community members are being trained so that when I step away, there are already people who are skilled to take that over and move forward with the organization. So partnership is definitely the key. And as we meet with the farmers, they all have the same needs: heavy equipment, labor. It's pretty simple as far as what we need, the farmers need, and it's simply a matter of getting the funding. So partnership is key. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was one thing that I didn't mention earlier, was partnership with research institutes. In PNG, when we have, there is climate change, there is drought, we have different parts of PNG that you need to address. So with us, with PNG Women in Agriculture, what we do is, we have been with the PNG National Agriculture Research for nearly 20 years. We take out all the technologies, the researches that they do per region in the country, high altitude crops, lowlands crops, what variety, whatsoever, and we are prepared. So we've signed an LOA with the government of PNG, and we've moved on to a farm that we call it the Resource Center, and that's where we keep all our planting materials. And it's not only for the lowlands, but then we have other areas, our farm organizations that we've organized, that they keep their materials too as well. And when it comes to a drought, or when it comes to an earthquake, or when it comes to, disaster, they're already ready. So we tell them, well, this is where they're doing it right now. And if you can help, do you have planting materials? So quick distribution is right there when there comes to disaster. So I encourage us that extensionists don't just work on your own, work with the research organizations and other partners that can also help in land resources, in funding. There are partners that are willing to fund you if you open up your doors and, work with them along, go with the tide. Thank you.
Kia ora again. For us, the NGOs play an important role as watchdogs, but they also fill the gaps that government is missing. We certainly are doing this with our NGO, but I think one aspect of when it comes to project, government tend to come in and take over. There are areas that the NGOs are very strong in, and government should support rather than taking over. And the other thing is we hear often about capacity building. And this is often being used as a hook to get funding, capacity building the capacity of those like people, the indigenous people or the farmers. But often this is what happens. People are sent to us to build their capacity. At the end of the day, they leave and their capacity is built and ours is not. We need to focus more on the people that live in those areas and build their capacity instead. Figure out a way to do that instead rather than, because it's happening here on Rarotonga. We're often from the outside looking in, all these individuals being employed by government, and they're seeking the knowledge of those that are on the ground, people like us, and they're learning in the process. And then they become marketable for other jobs, other places. Why couldn't we do that to our own people? So when we think about capacity building, we really need to consider that. That has been pushed for so long now, that our capacity is not being built. Yet, when it comes to writing proposals, that's what it's supposed to do, is to build the capacity of the locals, but it's not happening. So, yeah, I'll thank you.
A round of applause for our panelists.